So today we're going to be talking about a lighting breakdown. I'm going to break down some of the scenes that I got on a project working with Lumix to get them internal assets for their brand new RE Log-C update. I've already made a video about this, so I'm not necessarily going to go into it again, but I do want to talk about breaking down some of the scenes I needed to get because my job was to get a bunch of things to show off that new log curve, but I also got to practice more cinematography, and because I got paid for it and licensed out the footage, I guess this is a cinematographer's or filmmaker's job, but well, we'll get there. Now, this video isn't sponsored by anybody. If you do want to check out some of the lights, I'll leave in the link in the description down below. Instead of explaining every single light that's going to be used here, I want to explain where they are, where they're placed, and how I actually use them. And also, if I'm unclear about the gear that I use, just ask a question down below, but I don't want this to be a 10-minute video telling you about what lights to buy. I want to talk about actually breaking down some of these scenes. But let me just stop yapping and break down some of this lighting. So I'm going to show you some of the stuff in action so you know how things are placed and also how to get coverage without moving your lights around too much. Now, for one, here we did have our key light coming out of the side here, but keep in mind we're in an incredibly small room, but our key light is going to be on the side. It is the Aperture 600X, which I just used for a bicolor light. It was set to about 50%-ish, not super high, but that's going to give our key light that's going to be over here on this side of the face. And also just because I framed it out in editing, there's actually that black cloth that's over here. There's going to be that negative fill that's going to block off all the spill coming from this room that would come from these lights. So typically when you're in a small room and there's light that could reflect off a wall and give you return on your subject's face, that would hit the wall, it would come back, and this on here would have been a lot lighter, but we decided to use a black solid in order to give a little bit of depth and dimension. And then camera's obviously going to be on the side of where the darkness is to create that little bit of rampant lighting that's on here, and as well to give a little bit more depth going into the room. They'll typically say to shoot into corners and from the windows that you can't see, and we're probably going to talk about those windows after we talk about this next light. Now, also right behind that black solid, because I did want to get a little bit of an edge, which if I take away this gray, you'll be able to see. And just to get a little bit of pop off the background as well, you might see a little bit over here, is there is that SL60W, and I'll make a little blue sun. And that is on a C-stand peeking just behind the black solid to help separate the subject from the background a little bit, but at the same time, still give a little bit of contrast by creating a more darker side of the face while we're shooting on here. And then next, we're going to talk about these windows that are completely blown out. And you might be asking, because this shot is on the RE Alexa Mini LF, doesn't have enough dynamic range that you could see through the window. Why would you do that? Why didn't we expose to the windows and move from there? This is more of a creative choice that I made. And also the windows are frosted on the side. Even if I turn the exposure down on this guy, it's just a white sheet, which wouldn't necessarily provide any more to the scene itself. So I left it the way that it was. When we are in downtown Toronto, on the other side of that window is just a bunch of grungy buildings, which wouldn't have added anything else into the scene. Sometimes you don't necessarily need to expose for absolutely everything in your image, and sometimes leaving a window blown out might actually serve you a bit better, so that way you don't think about and get distracted by this big thing that's over here and what's through that window during this, and then you focus more on your character. This isn't something that I recommend. I don't recommend blowing out your windows all the time, but one thing I will say is sometimes it actually makes a bit of sense, and that's how we did this particular lighting setup. So Uncle Kofi was on vacation for the last couple of videos, but he is back with the Ghanaian language of the day. Now, my nephew has maybe forgotten something. He has to give you a detail. So I will say kose, which would mean sorry. If you have wronged somebody, maybe you have done something that you shouldn't have done, or maybe you've made a mistake. You say kose. Now, in order to say that you forgot something, maybe you are apologizing for forgetting something like my nephew has done today, Kwasi Asam, you will say, Meware afri, which would mean I forgot something, it is gone. So if you want to say the whole thing, so you want to say you apologize because you forgot, so you will say kose meware afri, kose meware afri. But seriously, one thing that I forgot was the diffusion sheet that we use for that aperture light. Now, what we did here is we just put, honestly, just the diffusion sheet from the softbox there in order to have enough room to have the light in the scene. But one thing that I actually used was this kind of 5-in-1 reflector that's a frame that's a 2x2 by Newer, of all places. You can get this on Amazon. It's reasonably cheap, and you can get a bounce. You can also get some negative fill as well in that little square, and also you can get a full little diffusion in there too, which helps break up the light and make it a little bit softer, but also it has a smaller kind of footprint than using a gigantic softbox. It's a little less cumbersome, so that way we can manipulate around the room. Now, this is what I mean for lighting for spaces and not for faces, because even though this is a different shot on a different lens on a different camera, the lighting is very consistent with our first shot. The way that we do this now is that when we go in for a close-up, you're actually more than fine with moving your light in, but the positions are still going to be exactly the same. For example, this is going to be shot on the S12E. This is using an 85mm Nisi Aureus lens, so we went for a more tighter shot, but more or less the lighting setup didn't change that much. We just moved our subject closer to the lighting, or you could just move the light closer to the subject, whichever one makes sense for your scene. For example, that 600 is still going to be our key light with that little shower curtain over it, which is giving you everything that's on the face over here. That's obviously going to be our key light. You still get that Nanlite 60B that's on here, which is hilarious because that's like a $100 light that you can get on Amazon. They're fairly inexpensive, giving you a little bit of blue on here, except this was set more to like 5600. I'll just put that there just so we have. And then this guy over here, and I'll just make this yellow so we know what it looks like. This was closer to like 45. So we did have a little bit of different tones going on here, and it does kind of make your light on this side a dark in the middle that's caused by that black solid. Like I've mentioned before, it's going to be right over here. It's still on this side of the wall. It's still creating this shadow or lack of exposure on this side of the face where I could shoot on the same side as camera at. So that way you still get a little bit of that triangle on this side. And that way you have dark in here, light on here, it's dark on this side, and then it's light on that side. You have a little bit of that pattern going. Now, what's fun about here as well, and I'm just going to change this as well, and we'll use red because it's a really hot mirror, is when we're getting in that closer shot, this blown out window doesn't bother you too much. It doesn't add nor take away from anything. And also there's nothing outside of that window that's going to be important either. This is what it's going to look like, and the lighting setup is almost identical, except we just moved our subject closer to it. And again, getting a more of like a medium close shot onto here, the lighting setup is exactly the same. You could run this setup all day long. Key light's going to be on this side. You do have that black solid that's creating a little bit of darkness on here so the spill doesn't bounce back. You have a light up on top of here that's going to give you a little bit of edge. And obviously we do have this window, which, yeah, I'm going to use red again. We obviously have this window that is incredibly blown out. This is hot. All of this back here, completely hot. But again, this was just a white sheet over the window anyways, and there was nothing outside of here that was interesting to begin with. And if you're not staring at it too long, it shouldn't distract you in your scene. Now, this is going to be different for everybody. There might actually be a reason why you want to expose for those windows, but in this situation, also because I didn't have enough lights to get this exposure without blowing this out, if there's nothing that's going to be interesting that's going to add to your scene anyways, in my personal opinion, I would forget it. Some people might disagree with that, but there was nothing out of there that I needed to see, and that's how we got to where we was. Now, also what's a fun fact is you might want to think about these as plays in a football playbook, because you could run the exact same lighting setup, add a little bit of variation to it based on your situation, and still get very similar results. For example, this is a slightly variated version where we still have our key light with that shower curtain that's on here, the 600Ds on here. I think we're actually at like 50. I think we're actually at 5,600 on here. So I'm just going to put that to 56K. Hope you guys could read my handwriting. And that would have given a little bit of spill in return here. You could see it on this end, and that was going to come right back into the face. And you could actually tell right here, it is a little bit lighter. Now, we did use a black solid, but it was farther away, so that's going to impact that shadow on here, but we still get that little triangle that's going to be on this side of the face. Now, we did have a light coming from the top to kind of give a little bit over here, except I actually don't think it was that strong enough. It was like a little like MC light that's going to come down onto here, also at 5,600 as well. That wouldn't have given us much, and it kind of didn't when we actually ended up looking at the frame. But if you notice anything back here, and I'm going to make this a different color. Let me make this like yellow. I like yellow today. And this right here is actually going to be what, if I remember, is my newer 300 watt light. I think it's like the 300C. I can't remember what the name of it is. I made a video on it. And Brendan actually brought in a lens projector system with a little bit of a window gobo. So that's why you see these little window slats over here. If you went to the previous scene, this studio room is literally right beside it. There is no window with these slats that are in there. So you could put this in the back of the frame. This guy is actually set to around 4200 Kelvin, if I remember correctly. So this guy's around 42K, and that's why it's a little bit warmer when you see the beginning of the scene. This is more neutral, and that's how we're looking. A lot of this actually kind of looks like the same setup as the previous scene. And if you have different ways to light different spaces, you're going to get very similar results, and you could just adjust things as you go. Using a big key light on this side while having a light either at the top or as a rim and having some sort of cloth that's in here, that's pretty much going to be my go-to and my bread and butter most of the time. And just being able to adjust it for whatever room you are, big or small, either using bigger lights, smaller lights, or different types of fabrics. This is all going to be incredibly useful, especially when you are stuck for a lighting setup and you have something that you need to go to. And that's what it means to light for spaces and not so much faces. Now, this is actually a pretty simple lighting setup, only requires 2 lights and 2 grossly overpriced blankets, if you will. But it's a way that you can use this, keep this in your back pocket, and then whenever you're in a room, you can use some of these same lighting techniques in order to have something as a go-to, especially when you're kind of pressed for time, because this is actually pretty easy to understand once you have enough practice. That being said, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you want to see more of these, because I think I'm going to start breaking down some of the lightings and the shoots that I do once a week, because I spent 6 months traveling and working, and I haven't made much videos outside of camera reviews, which I get it. I hear you. You don't want to see them all the time. So you're going to get some of this stuff instead. Views be damned. See you in the next one. Peace.